Well, with the trade deadline just about 2 weeks away, is Eugenio Suarez surely on his way out? We're talking about that and a whole lot more on today's mailbag edition of Snakes Territory. Hello and welcome to another episode of Snakes Territory, the official Diamondbacks podcast of the Foul Territory Network. I'm your host, Jesse Friedman, alongside the one and only Jack Sommers. And Jack, this is that bizarre portion of the MLB schedule where none of us really know what to do with ourselves. We have a couple days here without baseball before the second half of the season begins. But we did have a pretty fun All-Star game on Tuesday. I guess we can start our conversation there. A couple Diamondbacks players had some notable accomplishments in that game. Corbin Carroll hitting the first home run in Diamondbacks history in the All-Star game. Ketel Marte had a couple of RBIs. But of course, Jack, it wouldn't have been Diamondbacks baseball if someone didn't get hit by a pitch.
Yes. And I had quite the visceral reaction to that event on X platform. And fortunately, I wasn't ratioed. I got a lot of retweets and likes, of course, all from the Diamondback side, and plenty of comments. But, that was just reckless and inexcusable for Shane Smith to keep coming up inside. When I said online, that's not an accident, that's intentional, I mean pitching up and in. And I really can't emphasize the word up enough here. It's one thing to want to brush a guy off the plate a little bit, but it's the All-Star game. Why are you coming up and in on this guy? Now, he hit him July 23rd. Then the first pitch of the at-bat, he comes up and in, spins Gino out. When Gino's done doing his pirouettes, trying to get out of the way of the ball, what does he do? He looks out at the mound and just kind of like shakes his head like, dude, really? And then 3 pitches later, he hits him. And it's just irresponsible. I mean, Shane Smith, he's a major league pitcher. I know he's not the best pitcher in baseball. White Sox had to have somebody there. But was anybody else buzzing towers the whole game?
Yeah.
Nobody else was throwing the ball up and in. And I can't emphasize how bad that is to begin with, but especially in an exhibition game. It's inexcusable and really shameful.
I think, there's a case to be made that maybe Shane Smith, the guy with an ERA over 4, shouldn't be in the All-Star game to begin with, because frankly, the only reason he's in there is because every team had to have a guy. But we will talk more about this in a moment. I do want to tell you all real quick that we have a cool giveaway happening over at Chat BCC, which you guys can all get in on. It is pretty cool. We have a trivia game happening right now. And you can prove that you know ball with that trivia game for a shot at winning an authentic MLB jersey of your choice worth up to $400. Just sign up at foulterritory.chat, play trivia, crush it, and you might win. We are picking one winner from the top 10 scores at random. The deadline for that is July 20th. So get in on that over at Chat BCC if you have not already. Jack, yeah, I don't believe it was intentional, if I'm being totally honest. I think it was irresponsible, though. I fully agree with that. I mean, clearly Shane Smith was not trying to avoid this to the degree that he probably should have. But I just don't know what Shane Smith has to gain from doing this. I mean, he hit Eugenio Suarez a few weeks ago, as you mentioned as well. I don't know why that would start some sort of a battle between the two of them. If anything, it would make me think that Shane Smith would want to be more cautious the next time around. Maybe that's naive of me, Jack, but I just have a hard time believing that this was something that he was trying to do in an all-star game. It's an exhibition setting. It just feels like there's nothing to gain on his end from that. And I just don't know what he really would have to prove to anyone by doing that.
There's more nuance here. You're thinking this too much in terms of black and white. Like, did he throw at him and hit him on purpose? No, that's not what I'm saying.
Okay.
He threw up and in intentionally. And he shook twice. His catcher didn't want him throwing the ball there. Okay. And his catcher didn't set up there. but that pitch was boring inside from the minute it left his hand. And he's got a lot of ride on this fastball. What
Right.
Shane Smith was saying is, screw you. I'm going to pitch the way I want to pitch, and I'm going to pitch up and in.
Yeah.
That's what he said. I'm not saying he wanted to hit him. He's saying, I'm going up and in. Exhibition game, be damned. The fact that I hit you before, be damned. The fact that you looked out at me and shook your head at me, be damned. Here I come again. It's up to you to get out of the way. It's bullshit.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely see where you're coming from. I guess the good news from the Diamondbacks' perspective is that it appears Geno Suarez is going to be fine. The X-rays were negative, and the team is hopeful, according to a report from Nick Picoro, that Geno Suarez has avoided any kind of serious injury. Of course, there's maybe some skepticism there because we've seen this before this season, where you got the X-ray coming back negative, and it wound up being much worse than that. So. We'll wait for more news on Geno later in the weekend. On a more positive note, in the All-Star game, Jack, Ketel Marte drove in 2 runs. It appeared he might be the MVP about halfway through that game. He had the hardest hit ball of the night by exit velocity. I believe it was 109.8 miles per hour off the bat. That doesn't include the swing off, granted, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But I thought it was also cool, Jack, that Corbin Carroll's home run, which was, again, the first home run that a Diamondback has ever hit in the All-Star game, that was also the farthest batted ball of the night at 414 feet. So it feels like in D-backs history, we're used to watching this game, and it's, whatever position players the D-backs have, like, they go 0 for 2 with 2 ground outs and a walk or something like that. We all move on with our lives. But this time around was a little bit different.
Yeah, I mean, it was great for the rest of the country to see Corbin Carroll do what he does, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's legit power that we see all the time. I mean, he smashes the ball over 100 miles an hour all the time, and when he elevates it, it goes pretty far, and it gets out pretty quick. So that's what the rest of the country got to see, what we see pretty regularly. As for Ketel, I mean, I love on the replay. You see how off the bag the first baseman was, and Ketel just going the other way with the pitch and just shooting it past him. That was prototypical nice piece of hitting.
And of course, Ketel was given quite a bit of respect by Dave Roberts. He was the number 3 hitter for the National League, which is that definitely says something about the way Ketel is perceived across the game, that he was given that honor, and rightfully so. I mean, we've been saying it for a while. The list of hitters that are better than Ketel Marte, that list exists. There are a few players on it, but it is not very long. It might be Judge, Ohtani, and maybe you want to put Juan Soto on that list. I don't know. I don't think there's any other like obvious names that you would put above him. So good to see Ketel getting the respect he deserves. On the flip side, very sad to see Ketel report that we just got here in the last couple of days that apparently Ketel was robbed. His home was robbed back in Phoenix while he was at the All-Star game on Tuesday. Just a terrible story with all sorts of things being stolen and whatnot. Hopefully, justice is ultimately served with that situation. But I guess if you're a pro athlete and you're going to be attending some sort of all-star game, there's a bit of history here with this kind of thing happening in other sports as well. I guess you have to hire some sort of security while you're away, as unfortunate as that is. But we are going to get into some other topics surrounding the All-Star game, as well as, of course, your mailbag questions. This is a mailbag episode of Snakes Territory. We're excited to dive into all of your questions on the other side of this break.
The way to buy, sell, or trade your cards is Arena Club. It is the top marketplace in the biz to get that done. And Kratz, we love the slab pack situation because rolling through a ton of cards, physically opening them, finding all kinds of commons that end up folded or in the garbage is old news. Why not get a slab pack and get a chance at a card worth thousands of dollars?
I was a common card. It's okay if you don't get me in your slab pack because you put as little as $25 for a slab pack and you could pull out something that's worth thousands of dollars. And it's a keepsake that you get to wait, you know what? It might be worth this much today, but I get to watch the value grow.
And right now you can get 20% off your first slab pack or card purchase by going to arenaclub.com/foul and use the code foul. That's 20% off your first card purchase or slab pack at arenaclub.com/foul, code foul.
Well, we are back here on Snakes Territory, ready to answer some of your mailbag questions. Big thank you to all of you on Reddit, as well as on Twitter, who submitted questions. Unfortunately, we got way more than we actually have time for. So if we don't get to yours, we apologize, but we really appreciate you submitting, and hopefully we'll circle around to everyone eventually. Our first question this week, Jack, comes from Gingeronimo Blue Sheep over on Reddit. Of course, Reddit, we have all sorts of fun usernames. Did you guys also get D-backs game vibes during the All-Star game when the bullpen blew the lead in the late innings? Jack, I feel like that was sort of unavoidable. The National League, of course, had a 6-0 lead going into the later innings of that game. And then the American League came back and tied it up at 6 in the 9th inning. We've seen some similar games around here over the course of this season.
100%. I texted Alex D'Agostino from Diamondbacks on SI when the lead was 6-0, and I said, I'm just conditioned as a follower of a team that has had the issues that it has. I'm absolutely conditioned to this. They are so going to blow this lead. I was absolutely sure of it.
Yeah. Fortunately, Kyle Schwarber came through in a very, very big way, which is a good segue to our next question. This one also from Reddit, from Joker Fett. Would you like to see the swing-off home run derby format for tiebreakers incorporated into games besides the All-Star game? How would you implement it? And Jack, I think this is a question that was swirling around in a lot of people's minds after they watched what they did on Tuesday night. I thought it was awesome. It was super fun to watch. I've been rooting for it for the past few years, ever since this rule was put into play. Like, can we please get an all-star game that ends with a tie score just so we can see what this looks like? And it was pretty dang cool. And you can't help but watch that and wonder if maybe there's a path for baseball to incorporate this into the game more broadly.
For me, no. I loved it in the All-Star game. It's a great way to end an exhibition that doesn't count.
Yeah.
But for games that count, no, it's a hard no for me. I'm not an old fuddy-duddy in terms of being a traditionalist when it comes to baseball. But there is one rule that I've struggled with and that's the ghost runner. Like, every time I look up and I see the ghost runner there, I'm like, what the heck is he doing out there? And in this case, it's even more egregious in my mind because, look, it's not baseball. There's no pitcher involved, right?
No.
It's not pitcher versus hitter. It's a neat little gimmick it's fine for the All-Star game. It's fine for exhibitions. It's fine for banana ball. It is not fine for games that matter. Absolutely not. Hard no.
I think I'm with you there. I want it, but I don't. And really, I just think logistically about if this was implemented, how would it affect the way that you build a major league roster? And it would have an effect. Kyle Schwarber clearly is good at this. Jonathan Aranda, probably not so much, right? It's not complete coincidence who is good at this kind of thing and who isn't. And the number of extra inning games that we see on a yearly basis is not that small. Most teams have played about 10 extra inning games this season already. You're talking about maybe 15 out of the 162 that end in extra innings. If every single one of those was decided by a swing off, that means that having a few really good power hitters on your team could really swing a lot of those games in your favor. So I could maybe see it, Jack, if we got rid of the ghost runner, we decided to play regular baseball, which I know you would love, in innings 10 and 11, maybe an inning 12 as well. And if we still don't have an end to the game after 12 normal innings, then maybe I could warm up to the idea of doing something like this. But it would have to be, I could only see it if it was something that was very rare, like maybe would happen once a season, to the point that it didn't really affect how rosters were being built.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, Diamondbacks fans will appreciate this one. If you want to see a bunch of Kevin Crones occupying space on, major league rosters, then go for it.
Yeah.
I could go with like, okay, 2 extra innings of normal baseball, and if we absolutely must, ghost runner starting in the 12th. I could compromise to there, but I don't want to see this thing in any form
Yeah.
in games that matter.
I think I'm with you. It would be fun. It would be electric to watch those moments when they happened, but it as you said earlier, it's just not baseball, and the baseball traditionalists surely would not would not be on board with this one. Moving on here to our next question. This comes from Alan Leva over on Twitter. Is there a world in which we don't trade Gino, re-sign and have him as a full-time DH or transition to first base? This would allow Jordan Lawler to play third base. We need a first baseman after this season, and Pavin is not getting the job done at DH. Randall Grichuk, he adds, will likely be a free agent. Jack, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, the first part of that, is there a world where they don't trade Gino? There's absolutely a world where they don't trade Gino right now. And that's simply because of the fact that they're probably going to give him a qualifying offer at the end of the year. Gino has hit his way into potentially the Christian Walker deal, something along those lines. Getting a third year, getting $60 million guaranteed. And I think that the Diamondbacks are almost certain, if they don't trade him, to be considering that value of that compensation pick. So they're going to give it to him. So there's definitely a world where he's not traded. Now, under the situation where he's not traded and they move him to DH or first base, I don't think he would resign to be DH or first base.
Yeah.
They may trade him, but then if they go, they may not trade him and then keep him. But then if they say, all right, here we go, we want you to move over to first base and be first base / DH, I think at that point he just rejects the offer and says, see you guys. And you can't like rope him into, accepting the offer or signing him and then tell him, oh, by the way, we're moving you. You can't do that. So that, I don't think that part of it's very realistic.
Yeah, I'm with you there. It's hard to imagine Gino at this stage in his career being willing to move off third base. I think we're maybe not too far from that. As we've discussed on this show, the metrics for Gino at third base have slid significantly here over the past couple of years. Maybe before too long, that's something he might have to take a serious look at. But for right now, I think Gino still is good enough at third base to where he can get a contract from a team that is willing to allow him to play that position. So yeah, I don't really see a scenario where they re-sign him to play one of those positions. I guess there's
I'm sorry, go ahead. I was just going to say, to be clear, I'm not evaluating Gino's defense. I'm evaluating Gino's opinion of his defense.
Right. Which are often two very different things. When a player gets into their mid-30s, right, it can take a while for them to come to grips with the fact that, oh, they don't want me playing my, the position that I've played for the last decade anymore. That's a totally natural thing. I guess while we're on the topic, Jack, I know the question here is really just about Gino, but we can kind of expand it to the other main names that we've talked about a lot: Zac Gallen, Josh Naylor, Merrill Kelly as well. I think there's probably a world in which all of these guys are not traded. First of all, because at least from what we're hearing right now, the D-backs are not totally committed to selling. It appears that they want to see what happens here over the next week or so. I think they're mostly committed to selling, but maybe there's some world where the D-backs win 12 in a row between now and July 31st, where, maybe none of these, they're not considering trading any of these guys. But even if they stay in a similar position to where they are now, that same qualifying offer logic could apply to some of these other guys potentially as well. Zac Gallen, someone that coming into the year felt like a no-brainer that you would give him a qualifying offer. Would you still give him a qualifying offer now? I'm not totally sure. I don't think Merrill Kelly would get a qualifying offer given his age. So maybe the calculus is a little bit different there. But certainly for Gallen, maybe for Josh Naylor as well. I don't know how you feel about a qualifying offer with him. But anyone that you're willing to give a qualifying offer to, it doesn't make sense to trade that player unless you're certain that the return you're getting is more valuable than the draft pick you would receive if you just held on to them.
Yeah, I truly believe that Gino at this point is the only one that they'll give a qualifying offer to. I would say at this point there's less than 50% chance that they
Hmm.
give a qualifying offer to Zac. Now, if they don't trade Zac and he has a great second half, of course, then that changes the calculus.
Yeah.
I mean, we have projections, and I wrote an article about projections and what you can expect from these players for the rest of the year. In Zac's case, his projection calls for a 4.03 ERA over his remaining 13 starts, 76 innings. We'll see. That may seem a little optimistic at this point, but as I point out in the article, projections are based on a larger sample size than just this half season or 2/3 of a season. The inputs that inform a projection for a pitcher or a hitter go a lot deeper than the 20 starts that Zac Gallen's had. So it's not unreasonable to expect him to post an ERA in the low fours, but it's notable he came into the year with a 3.69 projected ERA,
Right.
and now his projection is 4.03. So that 5.4 that he's put up in his first 100 innings is definitely impacting his rest of season projection, and it's pulling it worse. So, there's definitely some movement there in both the analytical and objective side of the evaluation of Zac Gallen, along with the, oh my God, can this guy find any consistency? What's wrong with him? Can he throw a strike? Stop nibbling? All the emotional stuff that we see and feel, or at least me more than you probably. So, I don't think he gets a qualifying offer unless he goes on a run. If they keep
Yeah.
him and he goes on a run. I don't think Josh Naylor gets a qualifying offer, even though he's young. I don't think he's quite impactful enough from the power side, and his defense just isn't good. And so, despite the fact that he's only 28, it's not like his defense is going to get better at this point. It's only going to get worse. So, most likely. So, I don't think that Josh Naylor is a candidate for a qualifying offer either.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, and the other part of deciding whether you're going to give qualifying offers is that you have to be prepared for the players to accept them, even if you're not expecting it. Like if you give a qualifying offer to Naylor, Gallen, and Suarez, and maybe you're not thinking they're going to accept them, but somehow, some way, all three accept them. That's probably more than $60 million on the books just in bringing back those three players. And we don't know a ton about what the budget is going to look like going into 2026, but we suspect that the total amount of money that they will spend in the offseason is probably less than 60 million. So there'd be quite a bit of risk in dishing out qualifying offers to that level.
Right, and I covered this. We covered this on the show, and I covered this in a previous article I wrote in third week of June. Even a lot of people are counting up how much money's coming off the books, but they're not accounting for many people are not accounting for which contracts escalate, how much are arbitration costs, and then what's the minimum amount you need to fill with minor league minimum players for. That's the bare minimum you're going to need to spend. So if you got, 12 guys under contract and another 8 arbitration eligible, you still got 6 more roster spots that you at least have to spend $5 million on. And then you have injury replacements, and then you have the balanced 40-man roster. So when you add all that up, their budget, this year, what their payroll is this year is roughly 195, give or take, depending on who's doing the accounting.
Right.
When you take off 70 plus million, but you got to add back in another 20 plus million in escalating contracts. I calculated that they really only are going to have about 50 million if they stay at the same payroll level, which we don't know if they are. If they cut it, then it's going to be less than 50. If they keep it the same, it'll be 50. If they raise it again, then it'll be above 50. So they can only give a qualifying offer to a player that they're prepared to pay it to if he accepts.
Right. Yeah. It's going to be tricky for them to make those decisions for sure going into the offseason. Our next question comes from Gabby Dirth over on Twitter. Can you elaborate on why we can't fully sell because we can't field a competitive team the rest of the season? doesn't that highlight the issue of a poor farm system? Just scrape by for the final 50 games. What does it matter if you're already conceding? And I think this is a fair point, Jack. It's something that we talked about in our last episode, how there have been multiple reports now that the Diamondbacks would consider trading Zac Gallen or Merrill Kelly, but that they very likely would not trade away both of them. And you can hear what Gabby Dirth is saying here. It doesn't feel like a great reason to not trade those guys, just that you don't have the bodies to come in and fill them, right? It's certainly a flaw within the organization that there isn't enough depth there, but that doesn't feel like a reason why you would want to shy away from trading these guys. If you're not going to contend this season, then you're not going to contend, and maybe you should just try to get everything that you can.
I've been on that side of the argument at various points in the past, and so I certainly understand it. And I'm personally not, that troubled by that concept at all. However, I don't own the team, nor am I the general manager. So, I'm not privy to all of their projections for attendance and what they project it would be, what the impact would be on the season ticket sales, which are probably already going to take a hit.
Yeah.
Now, if you strip it down and, you only win 20 games the rest of the year, and, you end up as a 65, 68 win team, with just a dreadful performance over the last 2 months of the season, that's going to hurt. I mean, it's not only going to hurt in current attendance, it's going to hurt in future attendance. Mike Hazen very specifically said, look, I don't want to sit here and just come into the ballpark and watch us get our brains beaten every night. I'm not willing to do that. So he said that as well. And they're the decision makers, right? Ken Kendrick and Mike Hazen are the decision makers. Those are the two guys that are going to drive this bus. So for me personally, if all things considered, sure, strip it down, sell everybody that's not tied down, get as much as you possibly can, backfill as much as you can, and then move forward from there and use some of that savings that you get towards signing a guy back. Maybe you can save 10 or $15 million out of the whole thing, or even up to 18, I think I calculated at one point. And that money can go towards one of the players that you want to bring back. Maybe that's 1 year of Merrill Kelly that you just afforded. But, look,
Yeah.
I'm not the one running it, and it's not my skin in the game. So, and I'm not privy to all the information either.
I agree with all of that. The one thing I'll add is just that all of these guys that we're talking about only have the 2 months of control remaining. And so it might be kind of hard for some of these guys to get anything that you feel is really of value. And we've seen this occur with Mike Hazen in the past, where maybe it would have made sense to explore selling a certain player at the deadline, but if all you're getting back is, some high A prospect or something who maybe has a 20% chance of being a decent reliever someday or something like that, then you could argue that the team on the field continuing to be fairly competent, the point you're making about the season ticket sales, just the general reputation of the organization, maybe you would rather uphold that a little bit more than take some flyer on a guy who very well might never pitch in the major leagues. Those are real considerations when I think people might have a bit of a optimistic view of what the Diamondbacks can realistically get for these players, and I think it's important to keep that in mind.
And that's kind of why I wrote what I wrote today too, about the 5 projections. Like, you got to look at what these guys are actually going to be able to produce for another team with only 2 months
Right.
of control. You're not buying those teams. They're not buying the career of Zac Gallen or Eugenio Suarez or Josh Naylor or Merrill Kelly. They're not buying one iota of what they've done in the past. They're only buying the value they provide in the next 2 months. That's it.
Right. Yeah. Well said. Our next question comes from our friend of the show, Michael McDermott. Michael said, with 5 pitchers, 2 relievers, and 3 starters likely to start the 2016 season on the 60-day IL, would it be possible to see Hazen buy on controllable pitching for both the rotation and the bullpen if the right deal comes along? And based on the reporting that we've gotten here over the last few days, it appears this is exactly the Diamondbacks' plan. Nick Picoro had a great story over at the Arizona Republic this morning. Highly recommend people check it out if they haven't already. But it's very clear in this story from the conversations that Nick has had with Mike Hazen that the Diamondbacks want pitching, and they specifically want pitching that can help them next season as they try to endure all of the injuries that happened this year that are going to carry over into next year. There's a lot of those pitchers, as Michael alluded to. And I thought it was interesting, Jack, reading the story. I know you've read it as well. There's a quote in here from Nick, where Nick writes, an issue that Hazen expects to encounter is hesitancy from buyers to part with their major league ready pitching depth. So it sounds like the Diamondbacks would ideally love to have pitchers that they can slide into the rotation this year and can help them next year as well. We've been talking about that on this show for a while, that's probably the direction this was headed. But there's an awareness here on the part of the D-backs that getting major league ready pitching this time of year is going to be pretty difficult.
Nick's article even referenced the fact that teams were calling on Slade Cecconi at last year's trade deadline, and Mike was hesitant to give him up at that time because they might need him if there's an injury.
Right.
Another guy goes down. The other point that came out of it was, even if it's a guy that maybe isn't quite ready to step into the major league rotation today or even opening day 26, but could be depth midway in 26, somebody that they would, the development path stays as normal over the next 5 months of baseball, could be a midseason call-up of 26 as a depth option, because as we all well know, you're going to need lots of those guys too.
Yeah, a quote from Hazen in the story that speaks to that. Unless it's a pitching rich team, I think the highest level of pitching we might have access to is a double-A pitcher. Hazen is just laying it out right there in a public story that he doesn't really feel that confident that he's going to be able to get major league ready pitching this time of year. If you're a team that's in contention, you don't really want to trade that guy in AAA that maybe could be a big league starter but is providing depth for you. Those pieces are really, really valuable this time of year. Our next question comes from our buddy Jeff Irving over on Twitter. Do you think the draft pick compensation that teams get for losing players to free agency will allow a team like the D-backs to capitalize on trade value more so than people realize? Trade offers to get top talent still have to be worth more than the compensation picks they will receive. And this is a great point on the part of Jeff, for sure, that even though we can sit here and look at the projections for a Eugenio Suarez, a Josh Naylor, a Merrill Kelly, a Zac Gallen, and look at what realistically teams are probably expecting them to produce the rest of the year, on paper, it's not going to be a ton. It's not worth that much for just 2 months. But on the other hand, because the Diamondbacks could get draft pick compensation for one or maybe multiple of these players, these teams might have to overpay a little bit. Because if you're the D-backs, it doesn't matter if you think Eugenio Suarez is only worth such and such return. If you're the D-backs, you're going to be like, well, there's no reason for me to trade him unless you exceed the value of the draft pick that I would be getting. So even though the value here, Jack, is not necessarily super high with these players, the D-backs have a little bit more leverage because of that draft pick that they could get in return.
Sure, that leverage will allow them to hold the line, so to speak,
right,
and not cave in. It doesn't necessarily guarantee that the other team will pony up to the level above that compensation pick value. They might not.
Right.
Those are pretty valuable picks, right? I mean, Slade Caldwell last year, this year, Patrick Forbes. I mean, you're talking about 29, 28, 30. That's essentially, it's a first round draft pick, right? And whether you're talking slot bonus, that's $3 million right there, and then the value of the average compensation pick player across the spectrum is more than that $3 million slot bonus. Now, half of them never make the major leagues. We understand that, or a pretty high percentage of them. But the ones that do produce value. So when you average it out, there's plenty of value there that has to be taken into account.
The other point I'll make on this is that the Diamondbacks are not guaranteed to get a draft pick after the first round, as you described. They would only get that if the player signed for at least $50 million. So if the D-backs give the qualifying offer to one of these guys, the player rejects the qualifying offer and then signs for at least $50 million elsewhere, then the D-backs get that pick after the first round. However, if the player rejects the offer, signs for less than $50 million with another team, then that pick is a lot less valuable. At that point, it's between the second and third rounds, which is still valuable for sure. It's still a bar that the teams would have to clear in their trade packages if they wanted to acquire one of these guys. But I don't know, Jack. $50 million is an interesting number because I think I'm not sure if any of these guys are guaranteed to get more than 50 million, right? I mean, Zac Gallen coming into the season seemed like a no-brainer, but at this point, I still would probably take the over on 50 million, but I don't know. Eugenio Suárez, you mentioned maybe he's played his way into the Christian Walker deal. That was 60 million, but there's some margin of error there. I'm not sure where these contracts are going to land.
Yeah, I agree 100%. None of them are guaranteed. I would say Gino has the best chance at this point. Unless Zach gets on a run, he's going to be on a 1 year, maybe second year option, or 2 years with some kind of opt out. I mean, think of who his agent is and the types of deals that he signs. So if he doesn't get a 3-year deal, then he may not be over $50 million.
Yeah. What do you think a Josh Naylor deal looks like right now? If we're just totally I'm guessing it's under 50, but probably not by that much, right? I mean, because of his age, I think he's going to get at least a 3-year contract. 3 years feels about right. And I don't think it's 3 years and 30 million for Josh Naylor. I think it's got to be more than that. So I don't know. Maybe Josh Naylor would sign for 50 million and the D-backs should give him a qualifying offer.
How old was Lourdes when he re-signed with the D-backs?
It's a good question. Is this one of those questions you already know the answer to?
No, it's one of those questions that I'm asking you to look up because you're faster than me.
So Lourdes was, let's see, so it'd be after 2023. So 2023 was his age 29 season. So he was entering his age 30 season when he signed that 3-year, $42 million deal. Naylor would be entering his age 29 season. So he's basically a year younger.
Okay. But Lourdes is more athletic, can play left field, and debate as we like. But I mean, he was coming off a really great defensive season.
He had a 107 OPS plus though that year. Naylor's in the 120 range right now. It's a pretty big gap.
Yeah, I hear you. But Naylor doesn't hit lefties very well.
True.
I mean, he's very borderline everyday player because I mean he's just hitting lefties barely enough to say I'm going to play every day.
Yeah.
So that's if teams may not want to argue with him about it, but then they're going to pay him a little less. He doesn't want DH. He's not very good defensively. He wants to play every day. He doesn't hit lefties very well. There's some issues here to get him full value.
It feels a little bit Jock Peterson-esque almost. Obviously, Naylor doesn't have that kind of power, but this year he has like a 900 OPS against righties compared to a 644 against lefties, which is a pretty big gap. It's similar to Peterson, and it's like you definitely want him in there against righties, but against lefties, you don't really know what you're going to get. And obviously, Jock Peterson, even after the season he had with the D-backs last year, he signed for well under 50 million when all was said and done. So, but then there's the age gap. Jock Peterson's also quite a bit older than Josh Naylor. So we could go back and forth on all these guys for a while.
I think Lourdes is a comp there. Sure. Not a straight up comp as a type of player and a position, all that, but I just think in general, it's hard for me to see Josh getting more than what Lourdes got coming off of 23.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know. The next question we have is from Reddit. It says, who are players in our system that we should keep our eye on that could be called up post trades or later in the year when the roster expands for call ups? Jack, I know one name that we've talked about recently on the show is Hayden Dirk, a reliever the D-backs just promoted from AA to AAA, has some pretty absurd numbers this year in high A and AA, someone who we definitely could see being called up at some point this year. Who are some other names that come to mind for you?
Well, other than Dirk, I mean, I think Dylan Ray, even though if someone you kind of got to go like this when you go look at those AAA Reno ERA numbers, but he's had a couple of dominating starts. I think that he's a potential guy that could be called up and given some long relief work or a couple of starts even. I wouldn't count him out. Amongst him and Spencer Geesting and Yumin Lin, Ray certainly is the only one that I would trust on a major league mound at this particular juncture, as having a potential to hold his own. We talk about Bryce Jarvis. I mean, the guy gets, knocked down pretty regularly in AAA, and then he does a lot better in the majors. And we've seen this before where guys just put up horrific numbers in Reno, and it's like the opposite for hitters, right? They come up to the majors and they're not too bad, at least for a while. So, maybe Jarvis, of course, gets another crack. On the player position side, pardon me, if the D-backs are rumored to have been taking calls on outfielders, and if they trade one of their outfielders, that may open some opportunity for Jorge Barrosa to get one actual crack at a little bit of major league playing time. He's had very little, somehow burning up all his options without getting him any playing time. Amazing. And then there's one player that I think that could or even should be called up right now is Adrian Del Castillo.
Yeah.
I think they need to give it a shot there and let him come up and be the DH. I wrote about this as well. Let him DH. He's never played any first base. If you want him to play first base, you're going to have to start having him do it now in Reno or next spring training. But if you want to utilize his bat right now and he can be your emergency third catcher, I'm not calling him up to replace Herrera or McCann. I'm calling him up to replace Pavin Smith.
Right.
At least until Smith is ready to come back, and then see how that goes and then make a decision. Smith is out of options. Del Castillo still has options, but by that point, maybe Gabby's back and they're making other decisions and other trades. Worry about that when the time comes. I'd like to see Del Castillo get at least a couple week run as a left-handed DH here, just to see what's going on.
Del Castillo is hitting 288 this year with a 945 OPS in Reno. Very small sample size because of the injuries. That's in 14 games, 70 plate appearances. So you can't read into those numbers all that much. But we saw Del Castillo in the big leagues last year, and I'm not sure he was going to maintain the numbers that he put up, but he was clearly competent. And, you give him a little more time in the big leagues. I think he's easier to bet on offensively than a lot of the other prospects in this system. So I'm certainly with you there. I guess other names we could mention here, Jack, Tim Tawa, who we saw earlier this season. He was optioned down to Reno, I believe, on July 5th. But he's currently on the injured list. He was hit by a pitch there recently. He last played in a game on July 10th. So we don't know a ton about Tim Tawa's status moving forward, but as long as that injury isn't anything too serious, you figure he could get back on the field before too long, maybe become an option for the D-backs again toward the end of this season. Juan Murillo is back in AAA once again. The D-backs sent him down right after their game on Sunday. We don't know what the corresponding move is, but he's another guy that I could see get a shot here at the big league level. I don't know, Seth Brown, Jack, another guy the team just picked up, longtime member of the Athletics. He had a 565 OPS in 38 games this year. I guess he's more of a warm body than anything else, just providing some depth right now. But maybe there's a world where we see some Seth Brown in the big leagues down the stretch.
Yeah, I mean, he's hitting the ball well for Reno, but
Yeah.
take that with a grain of salt. A lot of people have also asked, like, what about Lou James Groover? Is he ready to move up? I'm actually a little bit surprised that they still have him in Double A. I kind of thought that he would have been brought up by now, especially once Lawler was hurt and they promoted Blaze. I thought, why don't they just bring him up to Reno and let him play some third base there? Maybe they think he's still got some more work to do with his defense. I'm not really sure. Now, maybe he gets the call very soon in the next few days or something like that. But I would think that if you're going to see Groover in major leagues this year, it would be September at the absolute earliest.
Yeah, I'm with you there. The D-backs like to send guys to AAA and give them some time there before really thinking too seriously about a big league roster spot. So whenever we see him in Reno, that's when that becomes a more serious conversation.
And of course, Lawler himself, right? I mean,
Right.
Someday Lawler's hamstring is going to heal. I think he should be ready at some point in August to play again. He'll need a little rehab time. So, depending on the moves they make, if he's not ready August 1st, then he may be ready by mid-August or something like that. So if they did trade Gino, then it's very possible that you could see Lawler sometime in August playing third base on a somewhat regular basis.
Well, we have one more question to get to on this mailbag edition of Snakes Territory. It comes from the basketball and football guy over on Twitter. When Carroll was out, Perdomo did a really nice job in the leadoff spot, and with a lot more slug and strikeouts from Carroll, wouldn't it make sense to swap those two in the lineup? Why are they so? Okay, this is a separate question about Juan Murillo we'll get into a little bit later. But Jack, I know this is something that you and I have talked about. I think you feel a lot more strongly about this than I do. So I'll give you the first crack at this one.
Well, just to give people context, Jesse and I had a 20-minute conversation on this question alone.
Which is not all that uncommon when we're going through these mailbag questions. But yes, continue.
we won't subject you guys to that, I promise. No, my thinking was simply I would have Perdomo bat leadoff and I would have Corbin Carroll bat third. I'm aware of the fact that the third hitter doesn't get quite as many plate appearances over the course of a season as the number one hitter. But at the same time, the number three hitter will face a pitcher with 2 outs and nobody on base more than anyone else in the lineup. And in that scenario, you need your number three hitter to be able to pop one over the wall and provide instant offense. And when Corbin does get on second base, a lot of times it's a double or a triple. I think since over the last month or so, he's hitting like 180 something, but 13 of his 15 hits are extra base hits. I mean, it's just absurd what his extra base hit percentage is. So, the number of doubles and triples he hits puts him right there in scoring position. If you can get one more hit, you've scored, as opposed to if Perdomo comes up with 2 outs and nobody on, he's likely to take a walk or get on base. I mean, he's with a base hit, but then it's going to take 2 more hits probably, unless it's a homer from Gino, to get him in. So personally, I actually like my number 3 hitter. This is kind of orthodox sabermetric viewpoints. Comes from Tom Tango Tiger, the book, if anybody's aware of that. I like my number 3 hitter. Doesn't have to be a high OBP guy. It's got to be a guy that can hit me a home run and give me instant offense. That's certainly Corbin Carroll. And on the flip side of that, I want my leadoff hitter getting on base and setting that table. And nobody on this team is really doing that better than Geraldo Perdomo. So I would go Perdomo, Ketel, then Carroll, and then Gino. If you want to put 2 lefties back to back, fine. I probably wouldn't do that. I'd probably break them up. If you wanted to go Naylor 4 and Gino 5, you could do that, but I'd probably flip it the other way and just force the other manager in a situation where he can't just throw in a lefty and, let him face 2 out of 3 batters are left-handed.
I think you have me convinced in theory. Like if I were in Torey Lovello's shoes, I would do what you're saying. I would have Geraldo Perdomo bat leadoff, and I would move Corbin Carroll down to the 3 spot. I do think it makes sense. I just don't think it matters very much. And you would probably agree with this too,
Yeah.
to an extent. I think that if we're having a conversation about why the Diamondbacks are where they are, why are they 5.5 games out of the third wild card spot? There's a lot of reasons, and I think Corbin Carroll being their leadoff hitter is very low on that list. Like, I just don't really buy into this making that big of a difference over the course of a full season. And I will also say that Corbin Carroll is a better run producer overall than Geraldo Perdomo. And there's also the line of thinking of like, you want your best run producers to just have as many plate appearances as possible over the course of a season. If the lineup wraps around for the fifth time in the ninth inning, which is something you see fairly often, you might very well prefer a home run in that spot than what Geraldo Perdomo would be more likely to do with a single or a walk or something like that. So I agree with you, but I just don't think it matters all that much. At the end of the day, you want your best hitters generally hitting near the top, and the D-backs have, I think, their two best hitters in the top two spots in the lineup right now. So it's hard for me to get too worked up about any of that.
I'd like to go look up, we don't have time for it, the late and close and high leverage numbers, Perdomo versus Carroll right now. I bet you'd find some pretty interesting numbers there.
Yeah, that's fair. I think Perdomo is he clearly has a skill of hitting with runners in scoring position. He clearly has a skill of hitting when it really matters. But couldn't you make that a case for him being in the 3 spot because you want him to have guys on base to drive in as opposed to him getting on base in front of other guys? Like, I don't know. I agree with the
That was
line of
one of your
thinking.
earlier counterpoints, so here we go.
I feel like we just kind of go in a big circle with this stuff at a certain point, but it's totally a valid question. I understand the line of thinking here, and ultimately that is what I would do. Perdomo is your prototypical leadoff hitter. He has a 370 on base percentage this year. It's way higher than Corbin Carroll's. I'm with both of you there. The other part of this question that we'll hit on real quick is, why are they so insistent on sending Juan Murillo down when nobody else in the bullpen has velocity? This is another one, Jack, where I understand the question. I'm not sure it's something I'm all that concerned about one way or another. I think we've seen that while Juan Murillo does have velocity for sure, he also has some pretty severe command issues. I'm not sure how many big league rosters he would make around the league, but you could make the case that given the state of the bullpen right now, that he should be in there, and the D-backs should be willing to wait it out and give him a full opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough call here, but at the same time, there's always things that kind of going on under the hood and behind the scenes that we might not be aware of. Like, for example, the game plan going in, like, hey, these are your guys. These are the ones you're going to get. This is the pitches we're going to call. This is what we need you to execute. We want to throw to this zone, whatever, and look where the catcher's setting up, and, he's going all the way over here, try to catch the ball. It's beyond just ball and strike percentage and walks, the ability to execute pitches and get to where they want to go. And he needs work. I mean, that's what they've determined. So, look, I have to just give into I don't disagree with the question or the premise of the question, which is, hey, this guy throws hard. We don't have enough hard throwers. Just let him figure it out up here. But I think they really wanted him to have a couple of weeks to work on things and fine tune some delivery. And then because of the Thompson injury, they didn't get to do that and they had to bring him right back.
Yeah.
So I think that they sent him back because they never got to accomplish what they were trying to accomplish in the first place by sending him down, which was have him find a way to get a little bit more repeatable delivery so that he can actually put the ball somewhere in the vicinity of where he's trying to.
It's a good point. I think a similar thing happened with Kevin Ginkel, where the Diamondbacks made a decision to send him down. And then I don't remember which injury it was, but Ginkel wound up coming right back up to the majors within a few days after that. Didn't really have much of an opportunity to work on things. And that is important. I think it's a lot it's a lot more approachable, I would imagine, for players to make tweaks in their delivery to try new things when they're pitching in Reno, as opposed to doing that at the major league level. So I think that's a good point by you, that we don't know the full story there. Maybe that has something to do with that decision. Well, we very much appreciate all of you submitting your questions. Once again, we got a whole bunch of them. Again, we apologize to those of you whose questions we were not able to get to, but we encourage you to keep on submitting. Hopefully, we get to everyone eventually. If you have not already, you can follow us over on Twitter at Snakes Territory. I am at Jesse N. Friedman. That's my personal account. Jack is at ShoeWizard59. If you haven't already, be sure to drop a like on this video. We'd love to hear what you think about any of the very wide range of topics that we covered in this show. So be sure to leave us a comment and let us know what's on your mind. We'd also really appreciate it if you'd subscribe to our channel here on YouTube, as well as leave us a review over on whatever podcast platform you enjoy most, if you are one of those people who likes to listen to us rather than watch us here on YouTube. Jack does a great job covering the Diamondbacks, of course, over at si.com/MLB/Diamondbacks. We reference several of his stories over the course of the episode, so be sure to head over there to check that out. Jack, anything else before we say goodbye and get ready for more Diamondbacks baseball?
I wish I could have brought the Flagstaff weather down with me. It's so nice up there. I just spent 3 days in Flagstaff just to take a little break up there and watch the All-Star game from a nice Airbnb up there. And we had deer running around the backyard. It was so lovely. But back to the grind tomorrow.
Well, it's only 97 degrees out today, Jack, and I swear everyone was doing cartwheels yesterday when it was like 94. So welcome to summer in Phoenix, Arizona. This is what we do. But thank you again to all of you for being with us. We really appreciate it, and we'll be back with another episode of Snakes Territory very, very soon.